is now my pleasure to introduce to you our next guest speaker, Amy Gravino. Amy was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome at age 10. She is currently a certified college coach for individuals with Asperger's and the founder of ASCOT, Asperger's Syndrome Coaching and Other Techniques. She is also in the board of directors of GRASP. Amy is also a writer, having pieces of her work published in Autism Spectrum Quarterly and the official online blog of Autism Speaks. She's currently authoring her book, The Naughty Autie, which chronicles her experiences with relationships, dating, and sexuality as a woman with Asperger's syndrome. So now, without further ado, help me welcome Amy Gravino.
This is nice and fuzzy. Oh, sure. Evolution starts with a letter. In my case, a letter that I wrote several years ago after I got a letter from a woman who was a reader of my blog. She said that she was the mother of a 9-year-old girl who had just been diagnosed with Asperger's, and they didn't know any older girls on the spectrum. And she suggested that I write a letter to my younger self as a way of giving advice to her, her daughter, and other young girls on the spectrum. So that's what I did. Dear Amy, I know you're feeling pretty bad right now. The other kids make fun of you a lot, and you don't know why. You're trying really hard to be friends with them, doing all of the things you think they want you to do, and it's just not working. But there is one thing you should know. It's not your fault. Other people might say that, and you won't be able to listen to them, but I am hoping that you will if it's coming from me. It's not your fault. Say it over and over in your head when you feel the worst, because that's when you'll need it the most. It's not your fault. How can it not be your fault? You'll say to yourself as the next few years go by. Everyone else can do this, can make friends and be normal. Why can't you? That's just one of the many questions I know you have. Questions you don't know how or are afraid to ask. They make you feel overwhelmed, like sitting in Mrs. St. Pierre's classroom every day, fidgeting nervously in your seat. You always get up during class to sharpen your pencil, and I know it's because you enjoy the smell when they're freshly sharpened. It calms you down. So don't feel bad if the other kids snicker or laugh when you smell your pencil. They just don't understand. You care a lot about what the other kids think of you. I know you hate going to pool every week because you have to change in the locker room and the girls make fun of your feet. This will cause you not to feel comfortable wearing flip-flops for many years, and you won't be okay with wearing them again until you're much older. It'll be like that with a lot of things people say to you in school. Their exact words will fade from memory, but the effects they have on you will last a long time. But don't worry, one day you're going to make friends with someone who really loves your feet and will call your little toe, the one that didn't grow in quite right, your lucky toe. That's something you feel like you could use a lot of right now, luck. You keep hoping things will get better, but they never do. I have some good news though. You won't lose that hope. No matter what happens, you'll still be optimistic, foolishly maybe, but when you're older, people will tell you how wonderful it is that you are that way. But I have to be honest with you, things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. You'll be in junior high school soon, and you don't know it, but 7th and 8th grades will be 2 of the worst years of your life. Once again, it's not your fault. You like to look at things outside the window. The trees and blue sky make you feel calm. One day you'll be in a study hall, and you'll go right up to the window and stick your head out of it. That's when someone will tell you to jump. Other voices will join in, and even after the teacher finally tells everyone to be quiet and calms things down, you'll hear them in your head for a long time to come. Every day, someone will make you feel less, not human, unwanted, and you'll keep your head down and take it, because no one's going to tell you anything different. But I will. You're not less, Amy. You're more. More because you have to work twice as hard as everyone else to make your voice heard. You don't know how to fight right now, except for when you lash out after not being able to handle the pain anymore, and then it's you who gets into trouble rather than your tormentors. They know how not to be seen, to avoid detection. You don't. Even as an adult, you won't quite fully master the art of subtlety, but right now you're bared to the world, completely vulnerable, and your classmates are taking full advantage of that fact. They know how to hurt you in the worst ways so they can get their jollies from your reactions. You can't understand what they're doing, and you just play straight into their hands every time. Once again, it's not your fault. These days, your classmates call you names: ugly, freak, psycho, loser, retard. They call you these things because they don't know you, don't care to, and/or don't want to. You're trying so hard to force yourself into their world with little to no success. But you will have friends one day, Amy. Better still, you won't have to fight for their friendship. They will come to you. I know how unbelievable that seems, especially since you feel like no one wants to be around you at all, not even your parents. But you are loved, even if you don't realize it. You just have to learn how to love yourself. There are some things that you're good at, Amy, like writing. You just started writing some poems and were happy when you saw them published in the local paper. Your mom and dad sent them in for you, just in case you were wondering how that happened. I have 3 words of advice for you. Keep doing it. Right now, you write because it's an escape from the world around you, and you don't care about being good at it. You'll get a bit of a competitive streak in the 8th grade when you'll come in 2nd place in the Charles Dickens Poetry Contest, and you'll be angry at yourself for not winning. But writing will become an important part of your life after that. In fact, one day you won't just be writing for yourself, you'll be writing to help other people. And your writing will help people, even when you don't realize it. So you've got to keep at it. It's hard to think that you're good at anything when people are constantly telling you that everything you do and are is wrong. In middle and high school, your fellow classmates will tell you to your face to kill yourself, and that no one wants you around or would care if you were gone. Don't listen to them. I know it's difficult, and their words will go right into you, but they aren't worth it. You are a good person, a person worth having around, and you'd make so many people sad if you were gone. The world is going to need you when you grow up, Amy, so you have to get there. You have to make it through these dark days, because you're going to make a difference in the future. Someday, people will want to hear what you have to say, and you won't believe it at first, but it will be meaningful and wonderful. You're going to have to take a lot of crap and go through a lot of pain to get there, but I promise you, it will be worth it. My time with you is now growing short, Amy. I hope that some of the things I've said have brought you comfort, or at least given you assurance that there is indeed light at the end of this tunnel. In short, things will get better. A lot of people will say that to you, and you'll think that they're crazy or just trying to make you feel better. But it's really, honestly true. You're an incredibly special, talented girl, and right now you're toiling in obscurity, as so many great artists do. But someday, the world is going to see how amazing you are, and all you'll think is, where were you people when I was younger? The future seems far away, almost impossible to think about, but don't be afraid to think about it. You're not even sure if you're going to have one, but you will. You will. And I'll say to you now 3 words that you don't hear very often, even when your mother says them to you. 3 words that you'll be desperate to hear when you get older, especially from an aesthetically gifted member of the opposite sex, but that seem very off in the distance right now. I love you. I love you, my younger, high-strung, spastic, uniquely wonderful self, and I'll be here waiting for you. See you in 15 years. Love and many hugs, your 26-year-old self. Mom, why do you have so many books that start with the letter A? I was diagnosed with autism at the age of 10, specifically Asperger's syndrome. And at that time, my mother scooped up every book that she could find about the subject, and they all filled her night table. But it was 1994, and there weren't a whole lot of them. But these books told us a lot of things. They told us that I was going to have problems with social skills, and that it would prevent me from making friends. They told us that my interests would be restricted and repetitive. And they told us that I would probably never have a job or even get married. But what the books didn't tell us, and what they couldn't tell me, was who I am. There was no Amy Gravino at that time. Amy Gravino didn't exist yet. By the time I graduated high school, there was just an empty shell. And it was only at that point, after having my self-esteem chipped away at for all those years, until it was nothing, that I was able to begin rebuilding Amy Gravino. And there were 3 moments that really reminded me, or began the process of making me realize that I was really a person and alive. And the first was when I had my first boyfriend at the age of 19. And we became physically intimate. And I had never done any of that sort of stuff before. And when nobody is expressing interest in you and your body isn't being acknowledged, you don't even feel attached to it. For so long, I felt like I was floating, tethered to the earth just barely. But my body didn't mean anything to me. And then when we started becoming intimate, that was the first time that I looked down and thought, hey, I have pubic hair. Oh my God. And it has a function. And so it took his touch for me to realize that I was physically there. And that was the first moment that I suddenly had any kind of feeling about my own body other than hating it. So that was what began there. And then, several years later, I was asked to be in a film called Normal People Scare Me, which was a documentary featuring people on the autism spectrum. And that was the first time that I felt alive spiritually. Because here I was, it wasn't just that people were hearing what I had to say, they were wanting other people to hear it, which was completely novel to me. And they were putting me in a film, which meant that there would always be proof that I was here. So even long after my cute little body turns to dust, there'll be proof that I existed. And that was remarkable to me. And then the third moment that I knew I was here was just a couple years ago when I started my own business. Because to start your own business, you have to believe in yourself so much that you think you have what it takes to do that. And I never did until that point. And seeing the name of a business that I created on a piece of paper, on a stamp thing that you stamp on checks, you know, and seeing my own business cards, it was suddenly like I was here. There's my name on a business card. I have a purpose. And I hadn't had that before. So my life is a life lived as a person on the autism spectrum. And when thinking back to who I am and how I got here, who am I now? Well, I'm a woman, and I'm a writer, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend, I'm an advocate, I'm an arouser and a rabble-rouser. I'm passionate, I'm angry, I am afraid, and I am fearless. I am the person who looks at what is and envisions what can be and what we must do to get there. The way that we look at autism now, we just had the new CDC prevalence rates come out, right? One in, I believe it's 68 children, and one in 42 boys. But a lot of times, girls are left out of the autism equation. When autism is referred to as a form of the extreme male brain, as it was by Simon Baron-Cohen, where does that leave me? Because I'm here, I'm on the spectrum, but I'm not a male, certainly, and I have my own things that I'm dealing with that are completely separate from what everybody else is dealing with. Just imagine if we took the criteria that currently exist in the DSM-5, the diagnostic criteria that we use to diagnose autism, and actually took into account the perspectives of people on the spectrum. Because the people who write those criteria do not have autism. They're writing from an outsider's perspective. So how can they really know? You know? And not only that, but those criteria were all developed back in the 40s by Hans Asperger, who observed little boys, all boys. But with girls, autism shows up differently. And so we often get misdiagnosed or underdiagnosed, and it's a real problem. So imagine if girls and women on the spectrum could have a part in creating a whole separate profile for girls on the spectrum so that we can be diagnosed better and not go through so much more anxiety and heartache than our male counterparts do. Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't it be something if, because this month, April, is Autism Awareness Month. But it's not enough to be aware of autism. It's not enough to tolerate autism. I want to see us all living with autism. And that comes when we do everything we can to help people on the spectrum be integrated into our communities. It's only been in the last 50 years that we've stopped institutionalizing people with autism. It's only been in the past maybe 10 years that we've been trying to create models to help people be in these communities. But it's very difficult when the rhetoric that is in those books that I mentioned earlier is all about the things that we can't do. What we've been operating from is something called the deficit model. The deficit model of autism is like what I mentioned earlier. The trouble with social skills, not making friends, can't do this, can't do that. Everything that my parents ever saw in those books was about what I couldn't do. There was no talk of what I could do. I want to see the talents and the abilities of people on the spectrum given as much weight as our weaknesses. If we can draw on those to help create techniques to bring people on the spectrum into the community, we'd be unstoppable. That's what I want to see happen. Because I keep thinking back to that little girl. The girl who was chased around at birthday parties by the other kids who were holding balloons because they knew that she would scream and cry if the balloons popped because the noise hurt her ears. I think of that little girl who wore pink sweatsuits to school every day and then purple sweatsuits when she decided she liked purple better. And then in high school wore gym clothes every day that she had gym because the day that she changed in the locker room and saw everybody else wearing bras and all she had on was an undershirt. I want to see her taken out of that shame and that sadness. I want to see her thrive. I want to go back to her, and I want to tell her that it's going to be okay. I want to tell her that this weight that she's carrying on her, and I don't just mean her 20-pound backpack that she wore everywhere in school, because she did, that this weight is going to be lifted. I want her to know that it's going to get better, and that she's going to be the one who's going to be fighting for people like her when she gets older. She wouldn't believe me if I told her. But here she is now, and Amy Gravino is standing here and trying to make things happen. And if I can make her feel that love, because she's still in here, and I still remember her, and I cry with her when I think about her too much, because I still remember. But if I can retroactively bring back that love, maybe she won't be so lonely anymore. And maybe all the other kids, the girls and the boys on the spectrum, will have a better chance. And all of us who are adults now on the spectrum will finally be seen and have our perspectives incorporated into how we look at autism and see what an asset it can be in so many ways. Then we won't just be accepting autism, we won't just be tolerating it, we'll truly be living with it.